Welcome to the Cherland podcast, where I, Connor Cherland, meet up with a musician, ask what makes them tick, learns what spurs on their songs, and then ask them to play a couple for us. On today's podcast, we have Will Breman. Will is incredibly talented, long-term friend of mine. I met him maybe 7 years ago now, which is crazy. He continues to learn and get better and better, and he is an incredible person to learn from, and I hope you really enjoy.
Good to see you.
Sweet.
Dude. How's your day going?
It's been slow, mostly school, but, working through it.
Yeah. What schoolwork are you doing right now?
This is my second semester doing my master's program, so it's mostly vocal technique stuff, like a lot of opera.
Yeah.
So this has been kind of remedial. So today, for example, is like just kind of going back into music history, music theory that I didn't take when I was an undergrad because I didn't major in music. So It's all helpful.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about law in a little bit, but because that is what you majored in originally, right?
Close. I majored in business and economics, and then I went to law school afterwards.
Okay, geez, so much education. That's amazing. So when you're talking about vocal techniques for like the school that you're in right now with opera, like what does that even mean?
Well, what it means here is it's just learning how to be a vocal teacher. Mm-hmm. For me, learning how to perform in that style, which is something that I only started really getting into when I was in college, because growing up, I was a contemporary singer, and I still am. When I'm out playing shows and stuff, I'm not over there like Conte partiro,
Yeah.
But going into it, it's one of those things. Like when I majored in business, when I did that in college, the whole thing there was to, one, I guess, keep the folks happy, so that they know that I will ultimately find myself in a job that pays and that they don't have to worry about me.
Right.
But also, like, it's kind of the idea of having a backup plan and, in a way, kind of just, like, finding ways to add value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of like the idea of just never stop learning, because when you're learning new skills, especially in a pandemic and stuff, when live music is no longer a thing, you find other ways to add value and therefore continue making like a stream of income.
Right.
And so for me, doing this master's program will just kind of give me, something to do while I'm continuing to work on being a singer-songwriter,
Right.
And so if that doesn't necessarily work out, at least I can go into another passion of mine, which is teaching.
Really? Okay, cool. So do you have interest in being a vocal teacher?
I have interest in being a music teacher.
Oh, just in general?
I mean, because it's one thing to learn how to teach people to sing, but I mean, for the last few years, I've also, been teaching guitar, been teaching kind of the instruments that I've taught myself,
Right.
And it's sort of the idea of like, to him who's given much is also expected much. So, in learning that stuff and in trying to get good at it, I might as well share that knowledge and share those experiences and share that wealth with others,
Totally. I would love to hear, so many people feel like opera is like super different from singer-songwriting, but like some of the operatic pieces you're learning like have some emotions that like singer-songwriter genres just don't typically get to do. They'll do vocal runs, or they'll like put melodies together that other genres don't get. So like, have you come across specific lines that have really inspired you, and like what have some of those lines been?
Oh man, I feel I've noticed that in studying it and in trying to improve at it, in a way, both sides of that have kind of helped refine each other in a way, Mm-hmm. The way that I approach doing contemporary music has in a way kind of honed in how I approach doing opera, and vice versa. Like if I'm doing a vocal run, just kind of, just playing something that I wrote, or, where it's like super soulful, I've noticed that that's been getting more accurate because of me doing something like from an aria that I've been working on from Mozart. There's a part where the singer's going like Sol tri lo solo, and it's working out the voice in different ways that it's not necessarily used to and that I'm not necessarily used to.
Yeah.
So I figure it's just kind of creating a more well-rounded instrument in that regard.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, like that kind of like that kind of like punchiness in a it is like a run, but most runs go like up by steps and then down by steps and then like rather than just like back and forth with like a that's a very cool line. Cool. What like one of the things I've always struggled with is like gaining a vibrato, like as someone who's clearly well developed it both within school, but I feel like you had it prior to that as well. Like someone who's just like trying to develop a vibrato, how would you get them to start?
Oh wow, that's a wonderful question. That's a tough one for me to answer because I feel like I've been singing for so long that it was something that just kind of came naturally to me when I was really, really young. Once someone finally showed me what it was, I just kind of emulated it.
Sure.
But like, I guess to practice it now, because there's so many different ways you can control your vibrato, and it depends on the song, it depends on the mood, it depends on a lot of factors. But I think the way to start that is just to make sure that, one, you can just sing a note on pitch. It's like playing a G, just just doing that, and then slowly but surely, intentionally kind of manipulating the pitch so that it's like and then after a while, it's sort of like it becomes so natural that you don't think about it. Violin players kind of have to do that when they're going through vibrato on their instrument, where they have to really intentionally move their wrist, and then over a period of time, it just becomes so natural that you don't really think about it. It's like doing a note on guitar. For a long time, I just had to figure out just how to do. And then over time, it just became a natural thing that you incorporate.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you always hope. I mean, I always hope that there's like some sort of silver bullet to like learn something, and then I'm always like slightly deflated when the answer is learn it slow, and then and then pick up.
Well, it's just because it's so monotonous over time. We want to just do the thing, and we don't realize how much work it takes to kind of get to that point.
Yeah.
When I'm playing shows, and tell me if you experience this too, you see these people that come up and are just like so flabbergasted, so enamored with what you're putting out, and they're just like, I just wish I could do something like that, but I just never had the ear for it. And I'm always the person who's just like, oh, I just practiced.
Right.
It's just that there's really not a secret to it. It's just taking that time to intentionally work those things out, and eventually, with time and with intentional like drilling on it, it eventually leads to that goal, and it takes sometimes a long time.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to control my vibrato in certain cases because, it doesn't make sense in certain contexts. I'm aware of that now, having like trying to study opera from various points in time, like when opera was started in the composer Monteverdi's time, which is like near the Renaissance, near the Baroque era. They approached vibrato differently from how you would hear it in a Puccini aria later on down the line. It's always kind of just back to that point of just always like learning how to, or just being intentional in practicing.
Yeah. Can you do a quick example of like how some vibratos differ? Like clearly there's like the fast vibrato, then there's the like more like languid, slow vibrato. Like when you're talking about those two different people, like what did that sound like?
I mean,
Also, I'm totally putting you on the spot. So if you're like, no, I can't give an example, that's totally fine.
I'm thinking of this thing I saw on YouTube of Monteverdi's first. This is the piece that created the genre of opera. His opera called Orfeo, and the whole opera is based on the Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. If you know what that is. The idea it's where Orfeo falls in love with Eurydice. They get married. She ends up getting bitten by a snake and dies, and he convinces his way into Hades to try and rescue her. And the only catch is that he can't look at her as she's bringing her back into the realm of the living. And of course, he can't do that. He has to look at his bride, and then she ends up falling back into Hades.
Okay.
But the character Orfeo is a known musician, and well, let's see. That's kind of beside the point, But
I love
something that you would probably
so I'm all
hear.
about it.
Yeah. But there's one particular aria, one particular piece that he sings that I remember seeing the guy who did this on YouTube, and he controlled it so well where it's like this like
Wow.
going in between
that.
Yeah. And it just worked. It just worked for what it was,
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't necessarily as intentional going into later centuries, mainly due to the focus shifting from the drama behind a piece, behind an opera, to more the virtuosity of the singers behind it.
That's interesting.
And that, in a way, that's kind of how we've perceived opera going into the present time. We don't think necessarily of Bizet's Carmen. We don't necessarily think of Puccini's La Bohème, but we do know the Italian tenors. You know what I mean? We know who Pavarotti is, right? Because these are just such giants when it comes to singing.
Sure.
That we focus on them and not necessarily on the plot line, on the drama behind it. So when it comes to vibrato, technique was obviously favored, but it wasn't used in a way to advance the plot as much.
Interesting.
So you don't hear as much variation on it. You just hear singers going into it. Rivolgete a lui lo sguardo e vedrete come sta. There isn't much variation. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. Back to something you said earlier, you mentioned how people come up to you after a show and they're like, wow, you're so talented, I can't believe it, I could never, I could never. And clearly you do have a ton of talent, but also I think your lifetime will prove more importantly, you are an incredibly hard worker and lifelong learner, which you already said. And that all has to do with a lot of practice, but it also what got you into so much learning? Because I know a lot of people who after college were cool, all done, and are your parents teachers or how
well, first up, thank you, and I feel like I see the same sort of stuff in what you do.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, for those listening to this, we kind of do something similar when we're performing, which is we live loop, but we do it in our own separate ways, and I know for me, when I started out, one of the big inspirations there was watching you do it,
Mm-hmm.
And, but back to that point, or I guess back to that question, I think for me, my parents, they encouraged me after a while to just kind of pursue what makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, I grew up and I live with being high functioning autistic, living with Asperger's syndrome. Although I think the powers that be kind of changed the names to that so that it represents levels of functionality when it comes to autism. And what that leads to for me is having very limited interests. You know, I don't have a lot of hobbies outside of playing music. And you know, the harder part of that is I always grew up kind of socially awkward. It was hard to make friends growing up, and it's still kind of an issue, you know, due to not necessarily being able to grasp social cues as clearly, you know. So what that means in the long term is that I've spent a lot of time just kind of by myself, bored out of my mind. And so what do I want to do to resolve that? Of course, I'm going to go to playing music and kind of trying to find a way to express myself creatively. And that's what music kind of became for me.
Yeah.
You know, just a means to express myself in a way that doesn't necessarily come as naturally to me as someone who may be neurotypical.
Sure. Can you give an example of a song that you feel like was able to express something that you maybe didn't have the ability to say, just normal speech?
I feel like a lot of my writing has gone that way, you know. But a lot of the songs that I write, I tend to nowadays just kind of write out all of my emotions. Just spend like an hour just writing pages and pages and pages of what I'm feeling and what I want to try and incorporate into a song, incorporate into a concept, and then it's sort of the afterwards, it's sort of the act of like distilling that down into the most, I guess, important and I guess depth-filled points. One that I do that well on is one of my songs on the record I put out in 2019 called Quiet, where it's basically just kind of me exploring this notion of getting out of college, kind of dealing with the emotions of watching a lot of my friends move on with their lives, get married, start families, and me just kind of staying single for a long time and just kind of working through that and trying to figure out what the next step is.
Right.
You know, because there's a lot there, and when you think about that by itself, for me it can be a bit overwhelming and a little bit overstimulating, but writing all of those feelings out and then distilling it down into just kind of more straightforward points, you know, has been really therapeutic.
Cool. I also love that song. Would you mind playing it?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So for those wondering, this is off my record, the Santa Barbara Soul Music EP. I put this out in March of 2019. Crazy that it is almost 2 years old.
Crazy.
They grow up so fast. Let me make sure I'm in tune. Yeah. Yeah, this one's a fun one. Let me get the lyrics up just in case.
No worries.
All right, here we go. This one's called Quiet. All my friends are getting married, and it's weird thinking that I'm at that age. But I went to a Christian college when I met them, so that median age is lower, like 23. But I'll gladly grin and bear it. I mean, it's not like I'm in any rush to find love. Been doing lots of working out and studying abroad, so maybe it'll happen when I finally grow up. Right now I'm trying to be fine with the quiet. I am trying to learn how to love myself. I try not to think about it. I was raised thinking that it would happen by now, but I look in the mirror wondering how I provide for a family when I could barely care for myself. Lately I've been trying to listen and take a lot of notes on all the things that I like. So maybe when the right one stumbles into my life, maybe I'll be better prepared, maybe I'll know it outright. Right now I'm trying to be fine with quiet. I ain't trying to learn how to love myself. Oh, I'm trying to be fine with quiet. I ain't trying to learn how to love myself. the people in the room, soul searching. You don't need another person to make you happy. You could do it just fine on your own. Raise a glass to the ones who ain't looking. To the people in the room, soul searching. You don't need another person to make you happy. You can do it this fine. Oh, I'm trying to find the quiet. I ain't trying to learn how to love myself. Oh, I'm trying to find the quiet. I ain't trying to learn how to love myself. Oh, I'm trying to be fine with the quiet. I'm trying to learn how to love myself. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well done, man.
Thank you so much.
That is a very good representation of some feelings. That feeling of being from just like, not even just Christian college, but just like Christian circles in general. Like, they pair off early, they get married real quick.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, you know? And you can probably, I don't know how well you can attest to this now, having been married for how many years?
4 years, yeah.
4 years. Wow, time really flies, dude. But I mean, like, it becomes in a way an expectation, you know?
Yes.
Having been a worship leader for a long time, you know, I've dealt with a lot of people who think that the real expectation that for someone to be on stage, for someone to be leading other people in worship, is that you have to be married. You have to have like 3 or 4 kids, you know? Your spouse has to look super boho, you know? And
that's a very modern reference right there.
It is, you know, but I mean,
boho is very hip right now.
I know, but am I wrong? You know,
no, you're right. I mean, you're totally right.
Yeah, no. And I mean, you knew the culture that I came out of. You know, having led worship at a church that I used to lead at, and that was a common occurrence, especially with one of the elders who would look at me and be like, "Hey, Will, good morning. Are you still single?" Yeah. And it's like, wow, that's super forward, man. That's super forward.
It's a hard way to start a morning.
It's a hard way to start a morning. Yeah, no, especially when it's like Valentine's Day weekend or like the holiday season when you're like supposed to, you know, and everyone in your family is like kind of asking, "Hey, you have a girlfriend yet, man? You find someone yet?" It's like, you know, on my own time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about all of that, I'm sure. I would like to like get into like some of the worship leading stuff, because it is a very different vein of like being like in a ministry position in a church, but also like still being a very talented musician in that scenario. Like, have you like what does that typically look like for you, and do you have you been enjoying it? Like, what's that experience been like for you over it's in Goleta, right? Anthem?
Yeah, I've been leading on and off at Anthem Chapel in Goleta, California for like the past, give or take, about 2.5 to 3 years.
Cool.
And it's just good to have a community that supports that, you know? Yeah. For a long time, when you work as a professional musician, what I've realized, having done it for the past, goodness, about 5 to 6 years, you know, in various contexts, is that there's a surprising level of having to prove yourself, in the sense of in the sense of having to prove that, one, because I'm playing a lot of shows, because I'm doing a lot of different gigs for the sake of getting an income.
Yeah.
There's always a group of people that think that my leading worship at a church is just another gig, or that my faith in God is somehow based entirely on holding a position as a worship leader, when in reality it's not.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I lead worship for the sake of leading worship, not for the sake of being a worship leader.
Sure. Yeah.
You know? And you know this. There's a distinct difference with that.
Yes.
And that can especially be hard out here when you're playing the Central Coast, because a lot of the places that hire are wineries, breweries, bars, pubs, places that, to the untrained Christian eye, I guess, are these nihilistic sin dungeons. I don't know what you would call it. You know,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The phrase "untrained Christian eye" was a good phrase right there.
Yeah. And that's hard when it's like, okay, I'm just trying to make an income, you know, and it affects how it certainly affects how I handle myself at stuff like that, you know. I make an effort to not, for example, pick songs that I curse in, you know.
Sure.
In a way, it's also a great kind of exercise in self-control. Not that like you or I would go hard drinking or at any of these sorts of places, but right. I mean, like, you know, it does affect that to an extent. You know, it affects right. what I like, for example, you know, I'm always kind of cognizant of how much free wine I have in my house. You know this right. Having played wineries too, and because I have a lot of people over, because I'm doing a lot of different things, you know. It becomes, in a way, kind of an issue of imagery, of images, of like trying to make sure that you look a certain way. And that can get tiring after a while, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, it becomes a real fun practice in, I guess, self-control.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned having issues reading social cues, and I feel like being a Christian worship leader, a single Christian worship leader, while also going out to the bars, like, you're dealing with tons of like unsaid social cues at that point, like having like I don't feel like it's like you mentioned image, but like with you, I don't feel like it's so much of like curating an image so much as just like making sure you're not going like too ham at any one point in time.
Yeah, basically. I mean, yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So personally, I've noticed like one of the benefits of like being married and like wanting to like be really professional when I am working, like getting like drunk on a gig is never really like an option, because one, it makes you sloppy. Like one, 2, 3 beers, like typically totally fine. But if you're getting like sloshed on a gig, I do think that it reflects poorly on you, and then you can't drive home, which is also just sucks. Because being home is awesome.
Oh no, I agree with that. No, early on when I was doing this, one, in a band, and two, kind of leaving that band to start pursuing a solo thing. You know, the whole culture kind of, it had to change. You know, the whole paradigm had to shift for me. Because I realized I was starting to incorporate habits that weren't necessarily healthy. You know, when I was in the band that I was in, we were touring a ton, and there wasn't really a lot of accountability between me and the other members, and so it led to, you know, and that's kind of going alongside having left the college that I went to. I went to Westmont College, and when you leave any kind of Christian bubble, you start to kind of like, okay, well, what do I do now? I guess this is my party phase, you know?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I think we've all gone through that in a sense, but for me, when I was like 21, 22, having been in this band, what I didn't realize up until later, when I was 23, 24, is that it was kind of a descent into alcoholism, you know?
Yeah.
And so... and I didn't realize that until a friend pointed out, you know, okay, Will, you're at an open mic, you've had like 5 beers, how are you still sober?
Sure.
how are you still functioning? And it's like, okay, I've built up that much of a tolerance. I need to be way more cognizant of that.
Oh, that's a very interesting thing for a friend to notice at that point.
Yeah.
Being like, I know that you're sober, but I know that you're 5 beers sober, which actually says something different.
Yeah, no, and I'm thankful that I had a great friend in that moment who called me out on that. And it changed kind of a lot for me, because you start to realize, okay, this is no longer something you're doing. I mean, it's still so much fun to do. That's not saying that I don't play music for fun anymore.
Yeah.
But if this is going to be my livelihood, then I have to treat it as such. I have to treat it with the esteem that it deserves and that it warrants.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense,
Totally. Yeah, that's moving into alcoholism. Like, I love this subject because like I don't understand why it's taboo when it's so common. Like, when kind of everybody has a story around it of like learning your own limits and learning your own body and like learning the type of life you want to have. Like testing limits is a part of that. And
exactly.
For most people, alcohol, I mean, there's plenty of other drugs, but for a lot of people, it's alcohol. And like, yeah, so what do you feel like alcohol was giving you, and at what point did you feel like it was taking something from you?
I mean, I think the good news about it, to your point, is that I think our generation and the generations after us are doing a much better job at talking about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to that. I can talk about how with Asperger's syndrome, for me, what happened, what I had to learn ultimately through just kind of self-reflection and in a way therapy was, well, first up, it shouldn't be taboo, you know? I think the generations before us look at that and like, oh, you're going to therapy? What's wrong? Something's clearly fundamentally wrong with your psyche. It became something that was very weirdly twisted into something that it's not, which like I recommend talking through those feelings and unpacking that to a professional, to anybody. We all need it.
Our generation's all about it.
Yeah, and I realized this later as I started kind of making a name more for myself along the Central Coast, just as Will Breman, not as me being part of a band. Just kind of getting that confidence back in myself and who I was, and who I am as a frontman. It's still taking a lot of time, because I think learning how I am on stage and how I am as a person is always going to be in flux, because we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always trying out new things, or at least I am,
Right.
But I think the big thing that came for me when it came to how much I drank at shows was that a lot of it was to kind of be somebody that I'm not. It became kind of the term liquid courage, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I kind of use that in a way to kind of put to the side all these aspects about my personality and that I didn't necessarily like about myself. That I had to eventually come to terms with and be okay with, and really, in a way, be proud of kind of the various quirks that I do have, Yeah. And, but in drinking, kind of descending into that, it was a way to kind of hide all that stuff, but that's just kind of putting a Band-Aid on the problem,
Yeah, it's just postponing it.
Exactly. It's kind of postponing the inevitable self-reflection that I think we all have to do,
Yeah. That's I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's a lot of people's story.
No, and it's important to talk about it. I think the biggest thing when it comes to talking about addiction, when it comes to talking about mental illness, when all those things, is that we think when we don't realize it, when we're new to it, and we think that we're the only person that ever has to deal with it, know. And for me, having a support group and being open about it and talking through those things and going to therapy and getting those tidbits, to practice mindfulness and to work on myself it's been huge. It's just been really huge, and I wouldn't be here without it.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about some of these tools that you've learned, just for like regulating mood, like being able to like be in touch with yourself. You talked about therapy, and you just mentioned meditation or like mindfulness practice. Like what does that look like for you?
Lately it's been kind of acknowledging and doing what's called a state shift. I don't know. Do you know who Tony Robbins is?
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, we know him as this huge motivational speaker. He's always on like level 10 energy, and as an introvert, I'm just like, I can't deal with you.
Right.
But I remember hearing this one from him, and then later getting it kind of affirmed through the therapist that I went to. This idea of like going into we've all had those moments where we felt like super depressed,
Right.
That's what kind of helped. That's what kind of led to me descending into that state, which is that I never really knew how to deal with that, and it's harder to deal with, when you also have this added, I don't know how to deal with social cues the way that people who are neurotypical would.
Right.
So for me, one of the state shifts he does, in a way, it's at first very counterintuitive, where it's like you're kind of acknowledging the depression for what it is. And kind of imagining yourself, like, what does that depression look like if you, let's say you're feeling like, on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 7, what does that look like at level 9 or level 9.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the exercise that he did that completely changed, my outlook on that was that you shift that to, like, what is the best memory that you have,
Yeah.
Imagine those feelings. Imagine, for me, it dealt with a person in a relationship, a moment in that relationship that I just cherish, So I'm imagining holding her hand, the way that her hand fit perfectly within mine, how I was breathing in that moment, what the lights and sounds were, and just kind of getting into that place. And that sort of state shift, when you start thinking about that and when you start thinking that kind of positive thought,
Yeah.
when you go back into that spot, you start to realize that those feelings that you had, that feeling of depression, that feeling of loneliness, that feeling of inadequacy, passes. It's not a permanent thing.
Right.
And especially with something like the pandemic,
Right.
and just kind of all the craziness that we've had this year, it's so easy to think like, wow, is this ever going to end?
Right.
Is this ever, is this something that's just permanent? Am I going to be feeling this for the rest of my life?
Right.
And it's just not, because like there's so much more to life, and there's so much more to people than just those moments. And when we're fixated on that, it's hard to think of that in the moment, but when you kind of force yourself out of that via like a state shift exercise that I got through Tony Robbins, it's just different. You start to realize there's a lot more well-roundedness to the life that you live.
Yeah, that's huge. I recently watched the I Am Not Your Guru movie.
Oh,
And
yes,
it's
I love
crazy,
it.
where he was doing that same state shift exercise where he was like, now I want you to picture, close your eyes, imagine the best sex you've ever had. And he was like, how were you breathing? What did you smell? What was she like?
I was wondering where this was going too, like, because that was part of Tony Robbins' thing. Like,
Yeah.
the sentence that he uses is like, what is the biggest? Remind yourself now, like, go into that state where you've had the best orgasm you've ever had.
Right.
And it's like, I lead worship. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if that's a place I should talk about or go into.
No.
It feels really like
No, we don't got to go into that.
We don't have to go into that, but it's
Yeah.
it's that feeling, but it's also kind of more to that because he goes into those other things. But yeah,
Right.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and he was just showing like, I mean, the movie's amazing.
Right. No, the movie's amazing.
It blew my mind. I was like, I don't know how any one man has this much power, but yeah, he definitely does. Yeah, it was just amazing watching how the man carried himself differently, how his shoulders, like his posture changed, his breathing was more regulated, and I was like, wow, that if there was ever proof for the concept, like the movie really brings it out. Do you have any other tools that you use, sort of to regulate mood or like regulate thought processes?
Well, I mean, for me, a lot of it came through needing and perpetuating a really strict kind of routine. When I was really going through it in my early 20s, I also noticed that I wasn't eating healthy.
Yeah.
I was waking up at like 12 noon for stuff, you know. My sleep schedule was completely gone. I wasn't exercising as much, like... and you could see it in like photos, like I just looked different. Sure. And not necessarily in the best of ways, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of it, like, it's more than just, you know, changing your diet, having good sleep schedule, exercising more regularly. But I mean, those provide a huge foundation. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I got, for me, I don't really do anything subtly. You know, because I don't necessarily get social cues. You know this now, having known me for as long as you do, you know?
Right, yeah.
I don't really do anything subtly because I don't know what subtlety is. I can't replicate that. That's just a part of my brain that never formed. So when I heard those things, like changing your routine, it gave me the opportunity to be a little nutty with it, you know?
How so?
So, like, I did this brute friggin' force thing where I went vegan. You know, I went vegan. I completely, like, aside from, you know, my mom is always going to cook a great Thanksgiving turkey. I have to provide, you know, you have to forgive yourself in some cases and provide room for that, in my opinion. Yeah. But, like, when I'm at home, when I'm touring, when I'm doing all this, I went vegan. Just laid off the animal products. And I noticed just that my head got lighter. It's not necessarily for everybody, but, you know, the reason why I did it is because so much of what goes into your brain comes from your blood, which comes from your gut, you know? Yeah. And so if I can control that, then maybe that provides a little bit of a sense of, I guess, level-headedness.
Yeah.
But not only that, I had to go from waking up at 12 noon to waking up at 4 in the morning, you know?
Oh, God.
To work out, to stretch, and to get kind of my running in, or to go hiking, to do something, right?
Yeah.
And part of that was like, for a while, like I made kind of a nutty promise to myself that for like 100 days I would just go see the sunrise every morning.
Cool.
You know? And I was living in Carpinteria at the time, so it was just an easy walk to go to the beach and have that moment, kind of... we would call it like a God moment, you know, that moment between you and God. But like for those, like that moment of just Zen, that moment of just refreshing, you know.
Yeah.
And it became something that I look forward to. It's like sort of waking up with like positive affirmations in the morning, you know.
Yeah. The sunrise is beautiful. It had been a while, like as soon as it was like right before daylight savings happened. It was like my first time seeing the sunrise because it happened like at so late in the morning at that point. And I was like, wow, I haven't seen a sunrise in like a year. It's so beautiful.
Oh, no, we're blessed. We live in Santa Barbara where it's like, you know, there's never a bad one, you know, unless it's super cloudy. But like, that just became something that like I would look forward to. You know, we think of the, crap, I got to wake up at 4 in the morning, right? But then you have to, you put kind of you put like a reason to do it. Like, I have to wake up this early, but I have the privilege of doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And that's changed a lot of other stuff, you know? Once you kind of, self-control in that sense becomes like a muscle that you have to work on, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, I did it the brute force way, whereas I think I think professionals would recommend that you, like, just do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But when you work that out, when that muscle starts to develop and grow, it becomes a lot easier, and you start applying that to other aspects of your life.
Yeah. Man, and just knowing yourself, like knowing that you're not a man of nuance, like going, like being able to embrace that and being like, great, I'm just going to change everything. I feel like what you eat on tour is so important. And like, you and I have talked about
Oh
this.
gosh, yeah.
You and I have talked about this before, but you were saying like every meal being pizza and beer, and which is like really great once, and then it's just kind of monotonous, and like you start to do it because socially it's weird to turn down pizza and beer.
Right.
It's like no, I'm gonna go to this restaurant instead because I don't want I don't want to feel this way in the morning. But it's like it's really important. Like it gives you a steady baseline to work from, and then you can actually focus and poop regularly.
Oh goodness. Oh my goodness. I think my first tour with the band that I was in, like we that's all that we would eat.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, like this is TMI, but I'm pretty sure there was a point in time during that tour, and we had toured for about 6 weeks. And I think I can only count on one hand the times I actually was able to make a proper bowel movement because we ate like crap. We ate like crap. Yeah. We would, and I don't know how they did it, but like for me, I just felt so, and I came back and I realized like after 6 weeks that I think I gained like 10 to 15 pounds, having done that, something had to change, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it kind of did. Once I went vegan, I feel like naturally I dropped like between 20 to 40 pounds of weight.
Wow.
Like I wore it okay because like all my fat just like accumulates in like my stomach. My arms have been always naturally really skinny, so you don't see it.
Yeah.
But like, feeling that, like, you feel it in your body more. My back felt suddenly, like, really, really well rested, My knees weren't hurting as much, And that all plays kind of into your mental state, The goal there is to always make it worth it to wake up in the morning. And when you're going to wake up in pain, there's always kind of a portion of you that's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Crap,
Yeah.
But having done that, it's just kind of it's all this stuff that we don't typically think about because it should be kind of obvious to us. You know what I mean? But when you realize it and when you're active in like intentionally creating those routines, it starts to become your head just starts to become lighter. At least that's what I've experienced.
Yeah. No, I entirely agree, especially when it comes to food. Especially just because you're giving yourself, like your body isn't fighting the food that it's eating; it's actually being nourished by the food that it's eating. So it's actually it's going to be able to function a little bit better. You're not going to be like in a grease hangover or anything.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I know that there's a ton of songs that you've already written and put out, but I know that you write a ton of songs and most of them not being put out. Is there anything that you're excited about or interested in playing right now that you haven't put out?
Sure. I can do one. Do you want me to do something super folksy or?
You can go any way you want.
Okay, because I feel like quiet is a little bit more high energy for me. So I'll do like a super moody folky thing. So yeah. I think with the pandemic, like kind of the songs that I wrote in my last band, and I was planning on making that into its own project to put out next year. But the issue being, that would require a whole band in a studio, so we've had to put that on pause, but it's given me opportunity to kind of work on a couple other projects. And one of those projects is just me going back kind of into writing more folky music that I used to write when, for those who don't know, I was a banjo player in a folk band. And this is one of those. Just another one of those examples of me trying to be really introspective, especially in my relationships and especially in my friendships. And this is just kind of a study in that. It's a song that I wrote called Timing. And I don't know when I'm gonna put it out, but we'll figure it out. It's gonna happen. I don't want to make a pun on the name Timing, so I'm trying not to, But The timing will be right. It'll happen. All right. Yeah. I'm a singer, I write songs, but timing's never been my thing. Found a goddess, radiance flowing, kind blue eyes gleaming through me, and when I finally mustered words, she was already out of reach. I should not have waited. I should not have waited. I was filled with spellbound weightlessness when I naively pressed. I ignored what should be obvious. She was never interested. Probably running for the door while I couldn't get it through my head. It never could have happened. No, it never could have. And it ain't worth the effort trying to justify my own self-pity. I just wish I saw the cues that normal people do more clearly. I was way too hopeful things for once would work out in the end, and that isn't me. Realization hit too late, and weightless feelings sunk to shame. Shut out everyone I could, would not be vulnerable again. She still saw me with this grace I'll never fully understand, but I don't deserve it. I did not deserve it. 'Cause there's no virtue in persisting when you can't change people's feelings. I'm still working to forgive myself and love without receiving. And ultimately she deserves to be happy in the end. And if that isn't me, then that isn't me. If that isn't me, then that isn't me. It's not about me being right or some status to uphold. It's about me being present, loving hard and nothing more. She deserves that, she deserves that. Hope she feels that grace returned. What more could I ask for? 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 Yeah. Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Well, dude, I feel like that's my favorite song I've ever heard you write. That song
Oh,
is really,
dude.
really beautiful.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you, man. Thank you. No, it's just fun, you know. It's what we keep saying. I think every writer has to kind of go through this kind of, I don't want to call it an internal conflict, but like the idea of being relatable versus putting in your own kind of life experience, you know? Because like on one extreme, you know, I know that I write songs that can be overly specific, can be overly descriptive.
Sure.
For the sake of trying to paint like the best picture of what I was feeling as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that risks people kind of having it go over their heads. But on the other end of it, you know, we can name so many different songs on the radio, on playlists, on whatever we listen to music on, that you hear the lyrics and they're just so freaking trite.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there's like no effort put into it, you know? Yeah. And for me, it's always kind of been, if too specific is like to the left and like not specific enough is to the right, I've always wanted to try and get somewhere like left of center.
Yeah.
Where it's enough to where people are drawn in, but also enough to where it's like, it's sort of like, tell me if this is how you may in a way view the projects that you've put out, but if I'm putting out a project, I always want it to be kind of like a book that people open, you know?
Yeah.
in a way, it's sort of transporting them to somewhere else, and and it's kind of giving them something that maybe they feel, but like they want to see it kind of outside of themselves. But I don't know. That's just kind of that's just kind of what it was for me. It's one in one sense you're trying to be relatable, but on the other end it's like, well, this is who I am, and this is kind of the emotion that I want to set, and this is these are the things that I want to say.
Yeah, I think that because you are so skilled with guitar and just have a lot of music knowledge, I feel like that song does a really good job of showing that off without it, but only in the way that it like adds to the song. Anytime, like when you're saying like like that chord, like in a lot of contexts would be like a show-offy chord, but it really complements the emotion of the line, which is exactly what you want. Like you want the music to match the emotion, and you want it to all fit and like have its own little groove.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's kind of wanting to again be in that middle ground, because I think we all know we all have guitarist friends who will like do every technique in the book,
Sure.
And in a way, it becomes you start to at least for me, you start to no longer appreciate the musicality behind it, and you start to think like, wow, this is really self-serving,
Sure.
And I mean, I've always been one to try and get better at guitar, and to try and be as good as I can on my instrument, for the sake of being a good accompanist for myself when I don't have a band with me, or when it's just me and my guitar and not like my looper board, and when it's all kind of stripped back. But it's never been from the sense of like, I'm just going to show off my technique. I'm going to show off how much I know. That's just not how good songs get written. That's how complex songs get written. Yeah. And sometimes there's a need for that, but when I'm trying to write good, honest music, there's always kind of a give and take.
No, I totally agree. Right now we're about at an hour, so this is typically when I close out. Is there anything that you wanted to promote or bring up, like have people be on the lookout for?
Well, this is kind of fun. This is like, we went through a whole podcast and we didn't mention the voice once. I'm sure Mendeleev probably felt that way too. I don't know, but no. Well, what can I promote? I mean, I have my Instagram. You can find me on all social media under the same handle, Will Breman Music. My last name is spelled Breman, Will Breman Music. You can find me on my website, willbremanmusic.com. If I ever post shows, once we get back into doing that, that's where you go. I'm working on a couple new projects right now. We're going to be releasing some new music in February, so be on the lookout for that. I just put out a lovely cover of a Spice Girls song. You know the one? Oh yeah, no. You've heard that song in various contexts for like 5 years now.
Many a year, yeah.
That's crazy to think that it's been that long, and it's been like, it's just still stayed a part of my life and a part of what I do out here, for that long. But we recorded it in Nashville, and it's exactly how it's always been supposed to have been in my head. That's the arrangement that they're doing. But we recorded that and we put that out in September. And it's on all the music platforms. Look that up. My EP, the Santa Barbara Soul Music EP, is also in the same spot. And continuing to write songs, continuing to do stuff, just kind of continuing to live the best life that we can out here in Santa Barbara.
Great. You also just turned 27, correct?
Yes, I did. That was last week.
Yeah, so happy belated birthday as well.
Oh, dude, thank you so much, man. Thank you.
And also to conclude us and to make sure, as a man also lacking some nuance, I would love to say some things to you just directly. You, obviously people talk to you about your talent and your musical ability and your skill in music and all of these things, but I think that your story has so much power for people who deal with the same thing. Like, it's not just people with Asperger's or autism who like deal with this kind of a thing. Like people have trouble regulating their moods. People feel like aliens all the time, and I think that you are someone who obviously like feels it so much, like experiences it so much more intensely than other people. And I like you right now, like compared to when I first met you, not only are you even more talented and better at all these things, but like you I'm telling you, like the truth is that you look better and stronger, and I think that you've set yourself up for a solid life, like moving forward. And I'm excited, and I feel very positively, and I think you're going to do well. But I'm really optimistic because of the work you've put in that you're going to have this really positive, fulfilling life moving forward.
Dude, that really means a lot. Thank you. And honestly, man, I could say the same about you, dude. Like, I'm always, every time I've seen you play, I'm always reminded of when we had first met in that random lot on that one side of Embarcadero del Norte.
Yeah.
You know?
Not a venue.
Not a venue, just like a taco shop that's no longer a taco shop.
Yeah.
And well, first up, like the thing that I'm sure you get all the time, and I know you get all the time, I'm like, wow, this 18-year-old kid, he's really good.
Right.
And it turns out you're older than me.
Right.
But on top of that, like, I remember hearing some of the songs you were writing and, like, thinking, wow, there's so much potential there. And to see you transform as an artist the way that you have, it's really inspiring. It's definitely shaped how I write, you know? It's definitely shaped kind of the concepts that I used to not feel comfortable going into, that, you know, well, if Connor is doing this and if my friends are doing this, well, heck, why shouldn't I do that, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of the, you know, well, one, who you are as a person, you know? And you've always to me been just so positive and so affirming of other people and just so humble in your own abilities when you're clearly, you know, one of the best out here too, you know? I really do believe that. And I don't know, I guess it's just been really cool to see this friendship blossom and just to see each other grow, you know.
Yeah.
And I hope that continues, you know.
Yeah.
I think us, as well as some other young people playing the Central Coast, you know, we've really created a culture out here where it's not like LA, you know, and having grown up in LA, that it's competitive, it's cutthroat, you know, having been on a show like The Voice or American Idol in your case, you know, you see that firsthand. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we've created, we and a bunch of other really awesome musicians have created this environment where we're all kind of supporting each other.
Yeah.
And it's like this one big, happy, crazy family. And I really do feel that, and I can't wait to see where that leads.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a great base. I think this has been an amazing community to start off with. And it's really nice to, anytime we can't do a gig, be able to pass the work off to each other, knowing that the other person's going to knock it out of the park, and then we're going to look good for recommending them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's... we need to make a business out of that, yeah. Right? Eventually, we'll figure it out.
Awesome. Sweet. I'm going to clap. And there we go. That's it.
That was fun.